my coach was like, even if you feel good at 16, even if you feel good at 18, even if you feel good at 20, do not press the pace. Like, you just, because, right, if you fall apart and you have 6 miles left or 4 miles left or 2 miles left, that's still a long way to go.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people.
That used to be me, but not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. Warwick runs on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Really happy to have you here. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Really appreciate you all being here. And I want to start this podcast by thanking all of you. Because yesterday I was looking at Spotify Wrapped, which is like this statistic kind of thing from Spotify for the year that has gone by. And 2025 has been a great year. I started this podcast in March. It was a day where I was sick, I was bored, and I was like, why don't I start a podcast? And here we are, 257 days later, and I'm blown away by these numbers. And I'm blown away by the fact that so many of you have this show as your top show, top 5 show, top 10 show. It's kind of surrealistic because I'm sitting here in the studio and sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself, especially in the episodes where I'm talking and I'm actually just talking to myself. And I have to, send a big thank you to all of the guests because this podcast is nothing without you guys. I would not be able to have a podcast, not be able to reach as many people, I wouldn't be able to make this kind of content if it wasn't for the guests believing in this podcast, saying yes to coming on, taking time to sit down and talk to me. So really appreciate that. And obviously you guys listening and you guys sharing all of this. And I'm so inspired, and I was sitting down this afternoon and I decided to make this run group on Strava. So if you want to join us, have fun, not count miles, but just, get to know more people, see other people's running, you can join the Marathon Podcast on Strava. Look it up and please join us. I hope that this will be a group where we can share experiences. Maybe if we have questions, we can ask those. I hope that this will also help us do events with the major marathons or marathons where maybe listeners just are together. So it doesn't really matter if it's a big one. I don't necessarily need to be there, but you guys will be there and you can meet up and you have something in common. Which reminds me, the marathon hat that I'm wearing right now is, it's up for pre-ordering on the marathonpodcast.com. And just to be clear on this, everything that I make on the Marathon Podcast hat will go right back to non-professional athletes through the Marathon Podcast sponsorship. So this is not me trying to make money on anything. It's just me trying to find a way to finance these sponsorships that I've been doing throughout the fall. If you don't know what the Marathon Podcast sponsorship is, you can look it up on the Marathon Podcast the marathonpodcast.com. But in short, I've handed out more than $15,000 this fall to non-professional athletes. I've had a lot of fun with this, and I hope that I can keep doing this in 2026. Okay, so that was quite the update on several things, trying to sell a little bit of products, telling you guys to join the Marathon Podcast on Strava, and obviously this big thank you. You are not here to hear everything about these things. You are here to listen to Lia. Lia is an amazing person, and she's just a great example of what this podcast actually can lead to. It's led to several friendships. I have good friends because of this podcast. I'm chatting with people daily about things that some of these things have nothing to do with running, but a lot of it is running related. And I'm just really appreciating those relationships, those conversations. And Lia, she's one of the listeners that I probably talk the most to. We talked about everything. We talked about marketing, as both of us are very into marketing, branding, all of that. We talked about running, and mostly we talked about her marathon that she did. She was doing her first marathon a few weeks ago. She was on the podcast earlier, and we talked about how her block was going to be like. Now we know the answer. We know the answer to how the marathon went. And safe to say, Lia is not done with the marathon distance. Really excited for you guys to hear more about this conversation with Lia. She is just such a great example of a big contributor to the running community. I really recommend you go follow her on Instagram to get updates on her journey, and I'm so excited to see where she's going. So Lia is this episode's guest, and before we jump to that conversation, I thought I would just give you a very quick update on my own running. I've been traveling this week, a bit jet lagged still, so I'm trying to kind of just adjust to that and not run too much with so much lack of sleep, but feeling very good when I'm running. It seems like my easy pace is actually getting faster, and it's pretty weird, but I think it has to do with that my legs have just so much energy and it feels like it's been just cramping up there trying to get out, and so that feels pretty good. Trying to run more on feel than on heart rate, but also trying to stay true to the heart rate zones of really not pushing so that I'm never more than a couple of heartbeats into zone 2. So that is what my running is like right now. I'm pretty optimistic about things. I just want to, again, send a big thank you to John for helping me out and getting back to running. Really appreciate that. And then you know how that is going. I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about this podcast. And as you might be able to tell, I'm kind of flying right now. I have a lot of energy and I'm very happy. So please enjoy this episode with Lia, and have a good run if that's what you're doing listening to this. Lia, welcome back to the Marathon Podcast. You're officially a marathoner now.
I know. It feels good to be on the podcast and actually be a marathoner this time.
Yeah, right. We've been talking for an hour now before starting to record. It's been great. And I'm so excited to. We actually haven't talked that much about your marathon, so I'm really, really excited about or to hear more about that. But first, like, how are you and how have things been?
Things have been good. It's been a week since the marathon, so been kind of laying low and not exercising or doing anything crazy, just letting the body recover, which has been really good.
Nice. And for the listeners who are new to the podcast after you were on the first time, why don't you give a short kind of introduction and presentation of yourself?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my name is Lia. I was on the podcast, I guess it was a few months ago. I was training for my first marathon. So that was kind of cool to talk about my experience. I'm also I'm on social media a bit. It's Life by Lia, but I work with Brooks Running. I'm part of their Brooks Running collective. So in our last episode, we talked a lot about, that brand and what they're doing in the running community and in the running space, which is really cool and has really just inspired my running journey, and really my love for running has really blossomed ever since I've been in that program. But since then, I completed my first marathon. It was the Indianapolis Monumental Marathon here in Indiana, and that was last weekend. So I'm honored, Christian reached out to me to be back on the podcast, which is really cool to be back on because I've loved the podcast since the beginning, and it's cool to see all the amazing athletes and, just different brands that he's had onto the podcast. So I feel honored to even be considered to be on here, but happy to talk about all things running always. So can't turn it down.
Yeah, thank you. And I have told you before, because we've been chatting on Instagram quite a lot ever since you were on the pod, and I'm not sure if you or people in general, listeners, kind of understand how much it means when you get those messages of like, oh, I love this episode, or if you share it, or there's something about it because it's obviously fun to see numbers going up, or the day you get sponsorships. I'm sure it's going to feel great, but I don't think anything will ever beat that feeling of, first of all, those like personal relationship that you relationships that you get, because like I feel like we're friends now, right? Like it's kind of like we're sharing things happening with our running or in our lives, and that is something that I appreciate so much, and I just want to say thank you to you for that. And it's just really nice to kind of almost feels like I have someone in my corner, right? We talked about it before the episode that if like I ever got sponsors on, you would be happy for me and you wouldn't be annoyed with the an ad roll or whatever. But I just think that it says a lot about you, and it's just something that I really appreciate. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, of course. I just think, I'm in the running space, so I'm listening to podcasts all the time, and I think there were just multiple that I had really resonated with, and I'm like, "You know what? I'll just shoot him a message just so he knows," because I don't know, just in general, I think sometimes I just think about the amount of times someone walks by me in a day, or you just think something good about them, like, "Oh, I like their outfit," or, like, you have an interaction with someone and you leave, like, happier than you were, when you started that conversation, and so many times I just think about that and how I keep it to myself, and I'm like, "You know what? We really should share that with others and let them know." So, um and I really appreciate you. I mean, you've been checking in with me throughout my marathon journey and giving me tips and advice, and yeah, you should probably be feeling like that, or like, yeah, that's normal, or so it's been a really great friendship too, and um I'm really grateful. So I did want to ask you though, because I've seen that you've released that the marathon podcast is now sponsoring athletes. And that has really piqued my interest because I'm like, that is super cool, super unique. No one else in the space is doing it. And like, how did he come up with this idea and how is he doing it? So can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, thank you for asking me about that. I think that what's interesting about it is that I think there were just a lot of thoughts kind of over a longer period of time. I was like, it would be fun to do that. And I guess it's like it started, I mean, no, 2 years ago. My best friend, he had to pay to go to the World Cup series as a speed skater. So then that he was kind of the first athlete that I ever sponsored through my company. So just to clarify that, it's just I have a filmmaking and photography business, so it's an LLC, and uh, that is something that I've been doing for years. That is my job. That is where I'm getting that's where I'm getting my salary from. All of that, and so that I think that I don't know, not the need, but I really wanted to help and contribute to athletes who want to do well, want to, get, I don't know, whether it's being the best in the world, but really getting their potential out. That is something that I really am passionate about. And having been an athlete myself before and not at the highest level, but I really tried to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever people believed in me, that meant so much. And so the whole initiative started with me thinking, I have had so many people on this podcast where I wanted to support them. And I also want to emphasize that there are a lot of people that I've had on this podcast that I wish that I could have supported. And it's not like, oh, I like this person better than the other or anything like that. It might be things that I've been told before or after the recording where I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Like this was kind of what made me do that. And that is like the very, you could call polished, flashy way of explaining it. Because if I stopped here, it would sound like I'm just an amazing person, right? Like it sounds like I'm just helping athletes. I'm just such a good and nice guy. And I'm sure you could argue that like it is a nice thing to do because they don't really have to do anything. They don't have to. They don't even have to collaborate on that post that I make announcing it, but I'm usually asking them if they're okay doing that because that would kind of be appreciated. And after announcing it, there's nothing they have to do. There's nothing I'm going to ask for in return. But here comes kind of the the second part of my motivation for doing it, and that is obviously a marketing stunt. And I have no idea if this will work or not. It's really hard to tell. I told you before we started recording that the numbers have doubled over the last weeks, but I think there are several factors playing into that. One of them could be the sponsorship. And if that is the case, that is great, because my whole point, or the whole reason from a marketing perspective, is to grow the podcast, grow the listeners, grow the kind of reputation of the podcast. And so if I'm able through this the sponsorship to have people start talking about, hey, have you heard about this podcast sponsoring athletes? It's like, what? No, really? That is kind of my whole goal with this, to make it into a thing where people are a bit surprised, shocked, but also that it becomes something that people talk about.
Yeah.
And so those two things were kind of those were the reasons for it. And then there were just several conversations with athletes that kind of sparked that. And I'm really hoping that I'm done with it now for 2025. All the athletes have been told. Not all of them are announced yet, but the athletes that are sponsored, they know. And it's been like more than $15,000. It's a lot of money. So I've obviously been going back and forth on this. Like, should I do this? It's kind of like a personal risk, since the money in my LLC is technically mine before taxes. So it's kind of like, should I do this? Will I have a good year next year? Is it okay to do this? But I'm really hoping that I can do it also in 2026, and then in a bit of a different way, where I will probably have an application system or something where like you could apply, or other people can apply for you. And then also trying to have kind of like whatever I make on these hats that I'm selling, try to have that go back to that sponsorship. So yeah, that was a long answer to your question, but I hope I answered some of your questions at least.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I think one thing I really appreciate about your podcast is your like authenticity with all of it. Like, you're like, hey, this is how it is. This is what I'm doing. It's very open, which is really refreshing and really cool. And I think it like brings us in, or at least for me, like as a listener, like I feel really invested in your journey, and it's cool to just kind of see it all unfold. So, sometimes in the marketing space, you got to take those big risks to see a reward. And I think you're really creative and you're thinking about things in a new way, which it's always cool to see. So I just love seeing where this podcast will go. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for asking, and thank you for that. I appreciate it a lot. And I kind of want to ask you back before we jump into your marathon and all of the running, because you are working in marketing and social media. You are like, I mean, I know that you're very passionate about it. You see a lot, and we briefly talked about different brands in the running space, just like overall. And I feel like running these days, I read somewhere that it's kind of the cheapest sport you can ever do, but for some reason now it's one of the most expensive ones, because we buy all these gadgets and fueling and shoes and all of that. From a marketing perspective, what would you say, like, running today, when you look at social media and people around you, what is the potential, and how in your role, or whether you worked where you're working now or anywhere else, how would you kind of take advantage of the running boom from a marketing perspective?
Oh, wow. It's
It's a
interesting.
big question.
It is a big question, but I feel like it's been cool as a runner to see how the brands are already reacting to it. I mean, you have to in marketing, you have to be on top of things. You try to be one step ahead, but it's almost impossible. But with running being arguably bigger than it's ever been, I think you have to really lean into the everyday runner and not focus on, the elites. You have to focus on the people that are out there every day. I think runners are a passionate and opinionated group of people. So I think anytime you can get feedback on products is great, or even we're all on Reddit to some degree, like just seeing what people are saying about different brands or different products or, new things in the market, what we're wanting in terms of products. Like I remember it was a few years ago, you couldn't hardly find shorts that would have a pocket for your phone. Now there are, I don't know, a dozen brands that do that. So just really understanding what the runner needs, I feel like is a good area of opportunity. I also feel like leaning into running clubs is a cool area of opportunity, right? I mean, every city has at least what, 5, 10 run clubs, and those are the people that are out there every day, just chasing different goals, different PRs, or even just running for fun. So I think there are ways that not like you could sponsor running groups, but just that you could, work with them on different product releases or, all of the different like Fleet Feet or kind of stores like that. You get a new shoe drop and then you have a test run with a running group. Like, I think those are really creative ways to kind of get your product out there, but also learn more from the consumer and the runner themselves.
I love that. That's a great answer. I'm impressed that you were able to kind of, yeah, because this was not something we talked about before. So it was a question that I just thought about and I wanted to ask you. And just to kind of build on that, if you, and this might be an even harder question to answer, but based on running today, and you're obviously a big part of this community, if you were to like start a brand or build a product, whether it was a product that is already out there or a new product, what would you say that has kind of the most potential? And then I'm talking about like, would it be a shoe brand? Would it be clothing brand? Would it be, nutrition, electrolytes? What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, I I would think I would go nutrition. It's also an area I'm really passionate about, and I think we've learned a lot within the last decade about nutrition. I mean, you just look at fueling and the amount of studies and just science behind how many grams of carbs per hour, how much salt per hour, and like how they were fueling the marathon 20 years ago is very different than how we're fueling it today. So I think there's a lot to learn in that space. Um, so I would probably do that. I don't know if I would tailor it for exactly maybe like intra run fueling. It would maybe just be like how to support good fueling pre, post run, but also just like as a healthy lifestyle because I think that they are synonymous.
Great. No, that makes sense also from, following you. And I guess one of the things that I've been very impressed with when it comes to your marathon block and all your running, because you're very good at, and I love how you've been sharing your journey, right? So you've been very good at sharing the details of like showing us almost what you're eating, not necessarily like everything you eat from day to day, but some of the meals. And I'm starting to kind of realize for myself that I'm good at getting the runs in, and I usually have good breakfasts and good dinners, but I'm really bad at everything in between. So I end up like having chips sometimes. It's like that's not sustainable for a marathon, right? Like so I need to be better at that, but that's why people like you, like it's very inspiring to see. So I just want to thank you for that, and I feel like it's a good transition into that, the marathon block that we're going to talk about, because like you said, we talked in July, I think, because you reached out sometime in July, and then I asked you if you wanted to come on the podcast, and I'm pretty sure you said what, but I haven't even done a marathon yet.
I
And
did.
I said that, well, that is actually a reason why I want you on, because it's great to kind of see how it is to approach your first marathon. And I don't think I couldn't have a lot of guests on where that would be the topic, right? Like how is it going? You haven't done it yet, but how is it going? But I felt like you were so dedicated. I knew that you were gonna go through with this, yeah. So when we talked, you it was just before your wedding. So congrats on that, being married and your wedding. And then you're gonna start your marathon block kind of officially after the honeymoon, I think.
Mhm.
And so that means that the whole marathon block happened after this. And I
Mhm.
know that you had weeks where you were really tired and it wasn't like that easy, but then there were also moments of, I guess, like a good confidence boost here and there. Will you kind of take us through your marathon block, the ups and the downs, and what it's been like?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. Um, but yeah, thank you. So I did get married this August. It was an amazing day, and we went on a honeymoon right after, and I had talked with my coach, and we had been working together the whole year, and he had decided that I would need 12 weeks to build for a marathon just based on, the volume I was doing previously. I had a very solid base. We did some speed work through the summer, so it wasn't like I was going to need, 24 weeks or 20 weeks to really build to the marathon. So we kind of worked backwards, and 12 weeks from the Indianapolis Monumental Marathon was the day I got back from my honeymoon. So I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Um, After our wedding, though, we did have 5 more weddings within this marathon block, which I will say
5.
5, yes, that were not
Wow.
ours.
No,
Um,
I got that. That would have been a lot for five weddings for yourself.
yeah, no, not even including ours. So 6 including ours, but
Yeah, right.
Um, my family and my dear husband was like, "Leah, like, do you think this is the right time for your first marathon block?" And, they always probably know better than I do, but I'm pretty headstrong and stubborn, and I'm like, "No, like, I'm excited about it, like, this is the best running fitness I've ever been in, I'm not getting any younger, there's always gonna be something, like, let's just do it, it's not my own wedding," so a little stubborn in that sense, but there were definitely some days when I had, an 18-mile run, a 20-mile long run that I started at 5 in the morning, and then, we were out dancing until 1 AM at a wedding, and I was maybe sitting more of the time than I would probably have liked if I didn't have a big run that day. Um, but I wouldn't have traded this block or this experience for anything. I will say this block could not have gone better, honestly, and I guess I don't have anything to really compare it to, but I'm very proud to say that I did not miss a day, I did not miss a workout, like, yeah, there were times where, okay, you switch a run from Thursday to Friday or this or that, or you have to do a long run before work on a Friday because you're in a wedding on Saturday and you're getting your makeup done at 7:30 in the morning. So, like, okay, I gotta get up at 3:30 AM the day before work or, like, you have to adjust, but luckily I didn't have any sicknesses or anything that really held me back, so I was able to do all of the workouts. Of course, there were some, like, you didn't hit paces how you wanted to, or you didn't feel as good, or you had your leg was hurting or this or that, but, it went very well. Neil is my coach, and he, progressed things very steadily. Um,
Who's
you know
also been on the podcast, so people can go back and listen to his philosophy if they want to.
Yeah, yeah, he's great. I mean, I obviously could get into it more later, but he's the best coach I've ever had, and it wouldn't have gone as well if it wasn't for him. So, um, he had a great approach, and he explained it all to me and is always willing to, go above and beyond to make sure I'm understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it, and also listen to, like, how I'm feeling if we need to adapt things. But we steadily, increase the mileage, just about every week, and, since it was only a 12-week block, he kinda structures things where I didn't really have a down week. I think maybe 1 week it was a little bit lighter, but since the down week was kind of, my wedding and then my honeymoon, we were pretty steady climbing the whole way. But I don't know, I feel like I really took to the mileage well, and I loved it. I mean, yes, there were weeks in there that were very hard and I was very fatigued, but doing more mileage was like, yep, give it to me. Like, yep, like I want to take on more. Like, you almost get into a routine where your body is like, okay, we're doing 7 miles a day, 8 miles a day, where it just like it, I don't want to say craves that, but it kind of does. Like, if I feel like if I were to have taken, extra days off, I took 1 day off every week, but if I were to take more than that off, I feel like your body almost gets out of a rhythm. So
What
yeah,
was your peak mileage?
my peak mileage was 60 miles.
That's really good. In kilometers, that then you're almost at 100 kilometers. So like, that's kind of just a big milestone for a lot of runners who are using the metric system. But yeah, it's fun to hear. What were you about to say?
Oh, no, I think that was it. It was good talking to Neil before the block because he's like, getting to X miles per week isn't really the goal. You got to see how you're adapting, how you're feeling, and kind of the mileage is almost just like a consequence of being a marathoner, right? It's just doing the workouts that's going to add up to that mileage. But he was like, I'm more interested in seeing 8 to 10 or whatever it was, 8 weeks above 50 miles than it is just seeing that one really high peak. So he just kept me consistently, I think, in that, 52 to 58 range for a while, which I think really helped with preparing me for my first.
And there are a couple of things that kind of come to mind for me when you talk about this, because one is that when you are talking about, or when we're talking 60 miles per week for you, right? One thing that I don't think is talked about enough is the fact that if you compare that to an elite runner doing 60 miles a week, you could argue, okay, that's much less. But say like Jess McLean, who I think she said that her sweet spot is like 72 miles or something like that.
Yeah.
But most likely you are spending just as much, maybe even more time on your feet than Jess does, because you are not as fast of a runner as Jess, right? So how many hours did you have every week? Do you know that? Or do you have a relationship to that? Or like when you had 60 miles, what was the hours?
Yeah, that is interesting. That's something I kind of want to learn more about, like the miles versus like the time. Because, yeah, of course, like Jess McLean's running paces I can't even fathom running. So it's going to be less hours. But I'm looking at my Strava. So at my peak week at 60 miles, I ran for 9 hours and 36 minutes.
Yeah.
But it looks like on average, it was kind of around that, like most weeks, 8 hours and 30 minutes, 9 hours, 8 hours and 50 minutes, like kind of that 8 to 9+ hour
Mm-hmm.
range per week.
Yeah, because I do see a lot of runners at a high level, and I hear about their mileage, and I was like, wow, that's so much. And then I look at their Strava, and then it's like, oh, but in terms of hours, it's not. The
Yeah.
difference is much smaller between me and them in hours. And obviously this makes sense because they're just running faster. But in a lot of sports, you might not really talk about the kilometers or miles that you're actually doing, whether it's on a bike or whatever it is. You will talk minutes, right? And we've kind of ended up having it. It's also interesting because if you say that you have 10 by K as a workout and you do that threshold,
Mhm.
then that is a much longer workout for you and me than it is for the professionals. So it's an interesting discussion. And like I said, I would also love to kind of dive deeper into that with some of the professionals. But I have asked that question, and I feel like they're also a bit like, oh yeah, that's true. It's maybe we do focus too much on the kilometers or the miles because it's hard. But also with that, knowing that 60 miles, 9 hours a week, that is a lot. And especially for you, like you're not a full-time athlete, you have a job. And I know that also even in the week you were tapering, you had a lot of work stuff to do and it was busy. And It was not easy. And then there were times where I don't remember if you wrote it to me or if you were open about it on social media, but you were saying that you didn't know if you kind of, if you felt like you were sacrificing a lot and there were like a lot of things going into the running and you weren't able to do all the other things. And I'm curious, was that something that was just there for, you know, like certain days or something like that? And now that you're done with the marathon block, you're ready to kind of start a new one? Or has it kind of taken a little bit of that motivation away from you because it just was all consuming?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Maybe now I'm, like, on the opposite side, so I'm riding this high and I'm like, "Oh, it was all rainbows and butterflies," and, like, I don't you kinda block out some of those, like, negative, I don't know, maybe feelings or days or emotions. But no, I know what you're meaning, and I think, yes, in those, like, peak weeks, I remember running and, like, everything felt hard. Like, let's just talk running first. Like, I'd go out on those runs, I'm like, "Man, that was, like, an easy run, but I'm kinda feeling gassed, my legs are tired," like, and I remember texting Neil and being like, "Everything feels hard. Is this normal?" And he's like, "100% normal. Like, this is you running on the fatigue. This is preparing you for the marathon." Like, it was hard to hit speed sessions. It was hard. Everything was just hard for a period of time, and I think in terms of sacrificing, I felt like my strength training went by the wayside, and I remember, being on social media, you see people, "Oh, like, as I get into marathon training, my strength training tapers off, or I do it less, or I don't have time to do it." And I think me being optimistic and maybe naive, and I was like, "Oh, well, like, I could still do 20 minutes of strength, like, no problem, like, I'll still be able to get that done." No, absolutely not. Like, you do a 10-mile run on a Wednesday, and even if I physically had the time before work to fit it in, you are just so exhausted and, like, you gotta get ready for your work day and you gotta do a bunch of other things. I'm like, "There's no way I'm gonna go try to hit legs right now." Um, and I think, I'm pretty adamant about warming up properly and getting better at foam rolling, and I have a good amount of, like, mobility exercises in a band routine I try to do, or even at the end of the day, I try to make sure I roll out my legs before I go to bed, and just so much of that also went by the wayside because you're just more tired when you get home, or, you gotta wake up a little bit earlier to squeeze in 2 more miles, so then some of that other little mobility stuff goes by the wayside. So I think I was shocked how little time I had for things, or even just, like, doing the dishes or packing my lunch that next day. It's like it does really change your energy, and I feel so incredibly grateful that I have the most supportive husband that, did the dishes every night and helped me pack my lunch the next day and, like, would do all those little things that I frankly probably didn't even always notice, but it definitely impacts more of your life than just, the runs.
Yeah, it's, I think for most people that is like, especially because that I think that what has impressed me a lot with you is that you've been so dedicated, right? It's been for weeks and weeks and weeks. You even said it. You hit all the workouts and the runs just day in and day out, and it seems like it was kind of you perfected this marathon block with together with Neil, which is really really inspiring. And I'm sure that some listeners here now, they're like, oh, this person must have been running for years and just have a lot of uh, a long background of long distance running. And I think that like I'm just gonna tell them to go listen to the first episode with you if they want like the long story. But if you were to just give a very quick kind of summary of your background before this marathon, because I know that it was a big change in terms of the load and the mileage.
Yeah. Um So to put it as quickly as I can, I started consistently running last year. So I'd say August of 2024 was when I started having intentional training, like, a 15-mile week, a 20-mile week, sitting in that range for a bit. And I built to my first, I was technically my second half marathon, but my first, I guess, competitive half marathon was actually the Indy Monumental Marathon last year. So November 2024. Prior to that, I did not grow up running. I did not run in high school. I did not um, do any of that. I was a swimmer and a dancer growing up. In college, you don't have your sports anymore. So my dad always ran for exercise, and I was home for break around Christmas time. I think it was maybe my sophomore year of college. And he was like, well, why don't you come on a run with me? And I was like, okay, how far are we going? He's like, a half mile. And I think I laughed because I'm like, that seems so silly. Like, why would we only run a half mile? Well, I was humbled immediately as that was very challenging for me. So, uh,
I don't think I asked you about this last time, but do you think your dad did that just to show you that you need to get start working out again or something, since he just wanted to take you out for half a mile?
no, I think I mean, he had a plan. Like before we started it, like I'm a very persistent person. So if I like want to get good at something, I'm going to set my mind to it and just I might not be the best, but I'm gonna, like, work very hard at it, and I love having a plan. So, he's I'm very similar to him in a lot of ways, but he also knows that's how I am. So, he had told me ahead of time, like, "The first week, we're gonna do a half mile, and then in a few days, we're gonna do a half mile again. Then the
So
next
so
week,
this was a part of building up
we're good."
your
Yeah,
running again. Okay, so it wasn't kind of just an initiative, be like, hey, you want to go for a half mile long run?
no, I mean, maybe he was, but I don't think he was trying to be mean. I just think he was like, "Hey, you gotta start slower than you probably think you do."
Yeah, yeah.
Which was very true and, just increased by 10%, and it is amazing kinda how quickly things can compound if you're consistent. But yeah, so that was my brief, running background, and then in college, one of my roommates, she actually ran in high school, so she's um, obviously a very talented athlete, but had kind of fallen off running in college. And we both kind of were like, you know what, let's run a half marathon. So we both trained and just found a program online and did a half marathon. I believe it was 2019. And at that time, I think I was 20 years old. So, but then since then, I just ran off and on. I would say more off than on, like, maybe 2 runs in a month, like, very little. So, really my true running journey, I say, started, about a year ago. I guess more like a year and a half ago at this point, but yeah.
And now you're a marathoner. So that's pretty cool. How does that feel?
It feels good. It feels a little surreal, um, just thinking about where I started and, the first time you even hear about people running a marathon, it's like, something you can't even wrap your head around. But then, I've been in the running space for a while, and it's something that's almost kind of normalized now. So it's kind of been weird just trying to, like, frame the marathon or the distance in my mind because at one point, I'm, like, running for 5 hours at any given time seems absolutely crazy. How do people do that without stopping? And then on the other side, seeing people do it, multiple times a year, is kind of crazy. But no, it feels really good. I knew once I started the block that I was gonna see it through, but for a while, I never wanted to do one, and I'm glad that I stuck true to that. I didn't, like, force myself to do it, if I didn't feel like I wanted to, and I always kinda hoped that there would be a time, like, in my mind where I'm like, "You know what? Like, I feel ready," or, like, "This seems like a fun new challenge," and that definitely happened, this May after I did a half marathon and the volume I was able to put in and, the way Neil was able to coach me and motivate me, and I got to that point where I was like, "Okay, I'm ready to do this." So, it feels really good to say that I actually did it, and I did it to the best of my ability, and I'm very proud of the result and, all the work that went into it. So, it feels good.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to the marathon itself, and I'm gonna let you share how that went and your time and all of that. But first, I want to touch on something that you just said, that it's kind of normalized with the marathon. And
Mhm.
you reshared, I don't know who it was who shared it, but it was someone shared this thing about how it's kind of become so normal to run a marathon that it doesn't seem like that big of a thing to do anymore. And I'm not a fan of that. Like, I don't like that that's where we are with the marathon right now. I'm obviously very competitive myself with the times, and to me, so for me personally, I'm time obsessed, and I'm sure in some ways I'm contributing to that pressure of like, oh, running a marathon is not enough. You have to also run it fast, or it's about PRs. But I am still like, for the longest time, kind of like you, marathon was never something that I even thought about. And I know that to a lot of people, or to most people, and that was honestly when I was training for my first marathon too. It's like, am I actually gonna run a marathon like that? Like I'm talking about it in the introduction of this podcast, like in every intro, right? Like, oh my god, a marathon, like that's 26.2 miles, 42 kilometers. It is insane when you think about it.
Mhm.
And I'm repeating myself on the fact that the slower you are as a runner, the more impressive it is, because you have so many hours on your feet. So I just wanted to kind of just say that again and emphasize how big of a deal it is to run a marathon. And I hope that anyone listening to this will be proud of just training for a marathon or running a half marathon or a 10K, whatever it is. It's just such a big deal. And just wanted to put that out there since you said what you said.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, and it's kind of a funny I've talked to a lot of friends about this too, because it really this m the marathon distance is normalized is really, in my opinion, only within the running community. You step outside the running community, I
Oh,
mean, like,
yeah.
I go to work and, like, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh," and, "How far is a marathon? How far was this marathon?" Some of those questions are kinda funny, but it it's not normalized in the normal population, which I think is good. But sometimes we get so just like honed in on the running community and the running world. And like even what you said about my build or this or that is like I'm unfortunately, and it's not the best, but like constantly comparing it to other people's or other people's times for their first marathon or what they did differently and how I could be better. And um yeah, so I think it is just interesting that in the running space, it has become normalized, and I 100% agree. It is an amazing feat to even finish it at any time, and, like, we all know that the training is the absolute hardest part, right? It's the dedication every day, day after day, the discipline, the runs you don't wanna go on, the runs you feel bad on, the things you miss out on, the early nights, the early nights you're going to bed and then the early mornings, so, um, it is truly, truly a big accomplishment, and I think the time conversation is also something I'm interested in, like, because I had a time goal for my first marathon, and there's a lot of, um everyone has their own opinion, right? Like, run your first marathon and don't worry about time, and I think that there is absolutely an argument for that, and I think that that makes a lot of sense. But I also think having time goals for your first marathon or just for marathons in general, like you were saying, um, I don't think that's anything to, like, be ashamed of or be like, "Oh, like, I get too caught up in times." It's because, at least for me, it gives me a reason to exercise with intention. And, time is a way for me to say, "Hey, I wanna keep pushing myself, and I wanna keep pushing myself to be the best that I can be." And time is kind of a way to quantify that. And in some ways, I think it's a little bit demonized, like, "Oh, people are just chasing PRs and this and that, and you're not happy with where you're currently at, you're always pushing for more," and I can definitely listen to that and learn from that, like, slow down a little bit and just, like, relish in what I just did and, like, how like, that's an amazing accomplishment, an amazing physical accomplishment before moving on to the next thing. But I also don't think it's bad that I have these big goals and I have these big dreams and that I am gonna chase them. And sure, you can call it time obsessed. You can twist anything to be a positive or a negative. Um, but like that's really what's motivating me and that's what's making me get out the door every day and helps me strive to be the best that I can be with running, but also in my everyday life.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We should kind of in some ways normalize both, right? That some people will enjoy just running the marathon and doing that, like regardless of time, is it's such a performance, such a big moment for anyone, I think.
Mm.
And then you have people like you and me, where we're competitive, and the time might be what drives us, what makes us do that little extra thing, be a bit more healthy, go for that extra run, wake up earlier. And I talked to Tristan Colley about this the other day, because it's so easy to, even for her, she's a 225 marathoner, right? And she still wants to get up there and be among the fastest in the world and fastest Americans. And it's so easy for her to forget that a few years ago, when she did a 240 marathon, she never could have even imagined that just a couple of years later she would be a 225 marathoner. And for us, that is what drives us, but we kind of forget to enjoy that and appreciate it because we see other people, and like you said, we start comparing it
Yeah.
to other people. But I think that the issue is if you and I were kind of being arrogant to other people who are just enjoying the process and the journey regardless of times, and we put that pressure that you and I put on ourselves on them. And I understand that some people might find that annoying because they feel like that is an invisible kind of pressure that is there without really, that is not my intention at all. But I talk about times, and then it could be that's what it sounds like. So when I was with a friend the other day, and she was talking about how she did her first half marathon, and she started downplaying her time, and I was like, no, don't do that. Like, you ran 13 miles. Like, that is crazy. Like, it's such a big deal that you actually did that, and you started training for that this summer. And I really do not want anyone to feel like they have to downplay their results because they think that it's bad compared to a lot of other people. It's just not what it's supposed to be like with running, because it's so helpful and useful for so many things, totally regardless of those times.
Yeah, it's just so individual. Everyone's, motivations for doing the sport, for the reasons to getting out there, for, even their why behind running a marathon. So, yeah, I just think if you're doing it just to do it, to prove something to yourself, to raise awareness for something, like, everyone just has a different journey that they're on, and just to, like, really accept and just support everyone's, reasoning, whether they do want a time or they wanna complete it. Like, no matter what, we're all accomplishing something really great, and just to always, lift each other up and encourage each other, which the running community is really, really good at.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're saying this, and then I'm going to ask you what your time goal was, because I know that it was a time goal for you. So what was your time goal for this first marathon?
Yeah, so after I had completed my half in May, um my coach had said that he feels I could, you know, pretty comfortably be under 4 hours, um, which to me, that sounded great, and that was kind of a good initial goal, was be under 4 hours. Um, to be frank, Neil thought I could be pretty close to 3:30, um, and to me, that sounded, I mean, right, amazing, great. I'm like, "Yeah, like, let's do it." At the same time, that would be essentially doubling my halftime from in that moment, right? And it would be, what, a little less than 6 months later, or about 6 months later. So I knew that that was pretty aggressive, and I'm naturally a little bit more of a cautious person, but I love goals and I love big goals. So, we had kinda talked, and he's like, "You know what, Leah, like, we'll just see. I'll start programming some paces. We'll just see how you feel. But I really think if you're in that, you could be in the 3:30 to 3:40 range pretty comfortably for your first." um, which to me was crazy because your first, you just don't know. Like, I feel like I had talked to so many people and it's, you blow up or you cramp really badly or, your stomach isn't well or, you get a really hot day or a really rainy day. Like, there are so many variables. So I think I was just really worried about um that and maybe putting something out there that is like, "Girl, you're crazy, like, this is your first marathon, like, you're gonna be humbled," and, I don't know, I'm someone that's naturally very intrinsically motivated over externally. So keeping those goals to myself kind of seemed right and still obviously really motivated me. So I think in my mind, I was thinking sub 340 would make me feel really good. But as the training went on and as we continued to progress, we kind of set the A goal as sub 335 and I had a B goal of sub 340 and I kinda knew any time under 3:45 I'd be really happy with, but my honestly, my biggest goal was to cross the finish line feeling as strong as I could with a smile on my face and not hating the distance. Because I knew if I, like, crashed and burned and had to walk it in or strained my calf or had a cramp, like, I would be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm never doing that again." Like, that was so hard, I trained for so long, and I hated it. And I just knew that I really didn't want that, so I'd rather leave some time or some fitness on the table and finish feeling really good, as good as you can, rather than, like, just full sending it from, mile 2. So, I did finish with 3:34, and I
Wow,
finished
wow, wow.
Thank you, but more importantly, I finished with a smile on my face, and I finished, and I immediately was like, "I can't wait to do that again." Like, I absolutely loved it. So, it was a really, really good day.
I feel like those videos and photos of you running, especially that last part of it, I assume it was the last part of some of the videos that I saw. I think that was, the definition of what a marathon should look like. That happiness, that pride. You could clearly tell that you were having a good time and how proud you were, as you should be.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was just very nice to see.
Yeah. Thank you. It's funny, the race photos came back and, race photos, I don't know, I never really think about them or buy them or really even look at them, but I went back and looked at them, and I mean, 90% of them, I have this huge grin on my face, and, you remember what mile you were at, and you remember what mile or what you were thinking or who you were by or just, like, the different moments, and it truly was, a really, really life-changing experience for me.
Yeah, it looked amazing. And I also loved what you did. And I think you did that a couple of times at the end of the block where you shared these photos of, a year ago or whenever it was, but just like a Strava screenshot of a workout or a half marathon. I think you had like a half marathon that you did as a race, and then you compared it to just your long run that was more like a normal long
Ugh.
run, and you were still faster, and you kind of just didn't even think about it as race pace. And I think that is maybe kind of going back to what we talked about with the times. It doesn't really matter with the times when you can just see that progress, because like obviously it could be that not everyone wants progress, but I would think that in one way or another you want that progress, whether it's time based or just that, oh, this felt easier this time than it did last time, right? And so I really thought of that was cool, because then at least in my eyes, when you posted that, I was like, well, doesn't really matter how this marathon goes. You just look at where she's at right now, because come race day, there are so many things that can happen, and you have those things can be outside of your control, right? So I just think it's great that you were able to share that progress completely regardless of the marathon distance.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I feel like at least this year I've posted a lot of those like comparisons like okay, this run last year versus a run this year, my time last year versus my time this year and I always am a little hesitant to post them because social media is hard sometimes and I just hope it never comes across as like cocky or anything like that. But I really think of my Instagram, or at least it started this way, as more of like a diary. And I also think about the posts that inspire me. And I love to see when other people post, like, hey, this was me last year and this is what I did this year. Because for me and my brain, I immediately go, wow, that's amazing that they did that. They've also documented it on social media. They've been consistent. Are they superhuman? No. So, like, to me, I'm like, oh, they went from this to this. Like, I can do that too. So that's where I kind of come from when I share things like that, is I hope it's like, hey, like, I wasn't a born running super fast. Am I still super fast? Depends who you talk to. But that's not really the goal. It's more just like, hey, if you show up and you do the work and you're consistent and you have a structured plan and you have, I would argue, a good coach in your corner, and you bet on yourself, like, you'll surprise yourself with what you can do. And it like gives me chills because it's why I love the sport and why I love getting out there every day.
But honestly, I think it's the opposite. That like it's not arrogant or cocky because you are. I think it would have been different if you shared like, oh, my friend did this run today and I did this. Like that then I would have argued that was pretty arrogant. But
Well, theirs would always be way more impressive than mine anyway, so it would be
but
self-deprecating for sure.
but it's more that I think that when you are just sharing your progress, at least to me, and it could be that other people would argue something like differently, but I would say that it just shows that you are having that progress, you're putting in that effort, kind of like what you said, things are possible.
Mhm.
And I also didn't feel like you were saying this was an amazing performance by me. It was more like I've become better and like I've had progress. And so I wouldn't say that it's different than anyone writing on LinkedIn that they got a new job, like a promotion, right? Because it's the same. So I think you should just own that, and just that is a great thing to do. So, question: I want to know more about the marathon itself, and I also would love to hear about this app that you used during the race, because that, like, back to what we talked about in terms of running tech or running things to kind of, if you were to start something, I think that the app, and you can explain the concept of that, but there was an app that you shared with us or your followers before the race in a way where we were engaged in it, and I'm sure you got to like enjoy that during the race. And I just thought it was straight at genius. So take us through the race, but also the app kind of throughout that race.
Yeah. So this app, it's called Rally. I think on Instagram they're called Run with Rally. I think I saw one of my friends post about it and I kind of inquired and asked them a little bit about it. But it's an app where you can set up the race that you're doing. And I believe, I don't know if they have multiple distances. I'm sure they do. But I did it for the Indy Monumental Marathon, and I just put in my name and what marathon I was running, and then there's 26 spots, and you could send the link to friends and family, and they could, give you a note, like, for each mile, and, like, they could it was a voice note. So, it could be maximum 1 minute long, but it was great because it would play through your headphones. It would just, turn your music down a little bit if you had music on, and then you would hear them talk to you as you pass the mile marker during the marathon. So, you started it right before at the starting line of the marathon, and then when you went past that mile marker, it would play the message. So, I had a numerous friends and family and people from my running group, and Christian even wrote one, and it was just funny to hear, what people had to say and like the motivating things they had to say, and um just throughout these different miles. So that was kind of also a nice way to stay mentally in the mile you're in, but also kind of have a distraction from what you're doing. And some of them kind of got you a little choked up just thinking about how much support you have, um, just leading up to the race and then during the day. So that
I
was
would
real.
also, yeah, I would also assume that maybe that makes it kind of like you're like, okay, now I'm excited to get to mile 5 because then I'm gonna get the next one. And then I guess you had no idea who would start talking, right? Because I was able to go in there, and I think I chose, was it mile 21 or 23?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so much fun because she's not gonna know who is. And it was also cool to see because there were so many of the miles taken already when you shared it. So people
Yeah.
must have gone in there and done it immediately.
Yeah, it's cool because I have no idea who did them. So, I think, like, the first ones that were it just, it was blocked off, like, okay, someone already wrote in a message for mile 22. So, you could only have a maximum of 26 spots. So, it was cool to see, like, I don't I sent it to a few people, and I don't know who ended up doing one, who ended up didn't not doing one until I listened, but, like, the ones at the end kinda got filled up first, which I think was cool because people are probably like, "Alright, this is where she's gonna need some motivation,"
Yeah,
and then, you hear people, like, some runners or people that have done a marathon before, they give you some good mantras or, like, I think even you were like, "Yeah, I bet you're feeling it right now, like, this is a hard part," like, so that was cool to hear, but then also I got one from, like, my husband, and he's like, "Leah, I'm gonna tell you a few jokes," like, whatever, and he
that's
just, like,
great.
riddled off some jokes, and I was just kinda, like, laughing and rolling my eyes, so it's cool to also see just, like, depending on who you send it to, the different approaches people take to it, and my sister, I think, did, like, 3 different ones, and some of them were just her
Nice.
screaming, and, it was really cool because you felt like you had people with you.
So did you end up having one for each mile? Did it
No, I
fill?
I think there were a few at the beginning that did not get filled up, which was okay, but
Yeah.
it was good because everyone, like, said their name kinda at the beginning, and, I mean, you could really recognize most people's voices, but, it was exciting because then, especially at the beginning, I'm like, "Do I have one here? Do I not have one?" So, you just didn't know, which is cool.
Yeah, that's an awesome app. I'm definitely gonna recommend that to people going forward and maybe use it myself because it just sounded like such a good idea. And it's again like that is really just helping our community, right? It's just a
Yeah.
positive thing, just positive energy. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Um
it's such a good idea. Like, wow, like, how have we not thought about this before? But then I've
yeah.
also seen people on social media, they'll, like, download one of the messages from their friend or someone that did it, and then they'll use it as, like, audio, for, like, a reel or something, and
Oh,
it's
you
really
should definitely
cool.
do that. That would be
Or
cool.
inspiring, yeah, or, like, they even, like, Mod Podge, like, all of them together, and then, it's clips of them running their race, and it's, like it's just so emotional because it's all your people
Yeah.
cheering for you, which is cool.
Oh, that's awesome. But then you did, obviously you did the race. We talked about it before, and I'm sure you talked to other people about it too. Like, what is the race gonna feel like?
Um,
Uh, I remember you were asking me some questions like, is it supposed to feel like this, or what is it supposed to feel like? And
yeah.
so now you have the answer on like to how what it actually felt like. So if you are like were to take us through this, and you don't have to do it mile by mile, but I'm sure there were kind of stages throughout this marathon where it was like, oh, I'm feeling good, or oh, now it's a bit harder. What was it like?
Yeah. I will say, having this be my first marathon, I think really helped me in the training block because there is an element of obviously the unknown, but fear, right? I'm like, I have to do everything. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to finish this race. And I know that's not true. And I knew that at the time as well. But like, there is definitely a fear component, which I think fueled the fire in a positive way. Um, but I was probably a little bit obnoxious because I know I talked to you or I talked to a lot of friends that had run marathons, and I was just trying to get an idea of, like, how truly bad will I feel after mile 20? Because everyone says it'll feel so bad. I'm like, "Okay, but, like, how bad? Like, am I gonna have to, like, stop? Am I gonna have to crawl?" Like, I was so worried, and nobody could give me a solid answer, which is so fair because it's so variable, it's so
Yeah,
different.
sorry about that.
Like, I mean, you can't, like, I'm someone, like, I want all the details so I feel prepared, and doing a marathon, you'll never know what it feels like until you do it, and I knew that to my core, but I was like, "Maybe it'll." Like, I don't know what I was hoping for, like, I think I was hoping someone would say, "Oh, it feels exactly like your first 20-mile long run." Like, I don't know what I thought I wanted people to say, but, um, I will say I felt a lot stronger on the back half, which sounds probably crazy. I started out, and I wanted to start out a little bit slower, right? Like, not go out too strong. One thing about me is I'm a pretty cautious racer. Like, my first miles are always slower, and I usually pretty consistently negative split my races, whether it's a 5K, whether it's a half, whether it's a workout. I usually always progressively get faster, which I think is a strength, but I think it's also a weakness because I sometimes don't fully let myself, like, experience how long I can, like, hold on to a specific pace. For this instance, for it being the marathon, for it being my first, I think it definitely helped me. But yeah, going back, so mile by mile, the first few miles, I didn't feel super great. Like, I was trying to hold around 8:15 pace. I felt, like, obviously okay, but I can't say I felt, like, particularly like, "Oh, this is easy, this is cruisy, like, I'm feeling good." You're also around a lot of people, so you're trying to get into a rhythm. Oh, I do remember being in the starting crowd, though, and, like, distinctly thinking, "This is the last time you're gonna be standing still for, like, 4 hours. This is the last time you're gonna be breathing normally, like, take in a few deep breaths." And I think that kinda psyched me out a little bit. I'm like, "Okay, don't think about that, Leah, like, let's just run." So, the moment I started running, everything was better, but, um one of my good friends, who's actually the friend I ran my first half marathon with, back in 2019, she was also running this race, and it was her first marathon, and she kinda caught me at mile 3 and tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Hey." So her and I ran a few miles together, which was a really good, comforting moment, and I saw her family multiple times along the course. But she ended up going a little bit quicker, and I was like, "Girl, like, run your race, do your thing." So, I figured her and I would be around a similar time just based on our training and our experiences, and we were, which was kinda cool. But, I settled into a groove around mile 6, I'd say. You split off from the half marathoners at mile 7. So, my brother ended up running the half, but so my family was out there around mile 7, so I saw all of them, and it was a good boost right at the time where it's like half marathoners this way and marathoners this way, and, you're like, "Okay, literally no turning back now, like, we're in it." Um, so felt pretty good there. At mile 8, I had really bad foot pain, and I kinda had a little mini spiral because I was like, "Oh my gosh." Like, I had felt this kinda towards the end of long runs at the end of my block, and I'd worked with my PT. It wasn't anything major. It was just kind of how I was landing and tightness and different things like that. But I was like, "If I'm already feeling this at mile 8, I have 18 more. There's no way I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna have to stop and walk at some points, or I'm gonna have to." 'Cause the only way I'd kind of fix it during a long run was, like, I would walk for, like, 30 seconds to a minute, and it would kinda iron itself out, and then I could run again. But I was really hoping I wouldn't have to walk. Anyway, so I kinda started spiraling. There were so many potholes being in downtown Indy, so, like, I rolled my ankle a few times, and I'm like, "Oh my god." It was so crowded, like, there were kinda cars coming the other way, which I don't know, I didn't love that because it was pretty narrow at some points. So I kinda was, like, just getting in my head, and then the sun was coming out, so I kinda started spiraling, but I remembered what my coach had said, and he's like, "The marathon is a roller coaster, like, you will feel really good at some points and be like, 'Yeah, I'm gonna crush this,' and then you'll feel really bad and be like, 'I'm gonna walk off the course.'" Like, there you're gonna have those, like, you just have to ride it, and I think him saying that was really, really helpful for me because 'cause I'm like, "Leah, just ride it out." Um, and, we all know during long runs, like, you have that too, right? Like, you have some miles, and even like I was saying at the beginning, a lot of my long runs, I wouldn't feel as good at the beginning, but then as I warmed up and got into it, I felt really strong. So I kinda knew that was my strong suit, but with it being the longest distance I ever ran, like, I feel like I couldn't really bank on that.
Because
Um,
what was your longest long run?
22 miles.
Yeah, so you've been up at quite like a long run, but
Yeah.
you still would have had 4 miles left to go.
Right. But, like, at the end of my 22-mile run, I mean, I remember hitting 18 and being like, no way. Like, I was not feeling stronger towards the end of that one. So I was not expecting that um, at all. So I saw my husband at mile 9.5 and we swapped bottles. And at that point, like I was in the trenches. I was like, we're not feeling good, but I just kept going. Saw my friends at mile 13, they gave me a thumbs up and I'm like, I feel great. Like, you run past them like, okay, put a smile on your face and have a good form. And like, I'm like, maybe they'll think I look good because I do not feel good. Um, but it's like I hit the half mark and it was like a switch flipped. And all of a sudden, it was kinda like your legs are on autopilot, like, your music is going, like, you got the good songs on your playlist going, and miles 14 to 22, I felt my strongest. Um, and it's crazy, you see at 16 and then at 18 and then at 20, people stopping or throwing up or, cramping or, like, just kinda struggling, and I just still felt so good, and my coach was like, "Even if you feel good at 16, even if you feel good at 18, even if you feel good at 20, do not press the pace." Like, you just 'cause, right, if you fall apart and you have 6 miles left or 4 miles left or 2 miles left, that's still a long way to go. So, I was just like, stay where you're at, like, stay in the rhythm, don't try to go faster, slower, like, you're in a good place. I was manually splitting the whole race, so at every mile marker, I hit the lap button, which I think definitely helped me, but I kind of especially towards the end, I didn't really know, like, where I was at time-wise. Like, it's just so like, I knew I was sitting at, like, 8:12s for a while. I thought I had to be closer to 8:10s, so I'm like, "Okay," but, it was really at, like, mile 24. I was like, "Okay, Leah, we can start, like, picking it up a little bit." But I don't know, I remember looking down and thinking, I'm like, "Okay, maybe I'll go 3:38." Like, I could not do the math, I'm like, "You know what? Whenever I cross the finish line is when I cross the finish line. I'm staying in this pocket where I feel really good, and we're gonna ride it in." But my last mile ended up being, like, 30 seconds faster than my average pace.
Wow.
I ran, like, a 7:40 last mile, so I had a lot of gas in the tank, more than I thought. And I didn't cramp or anything, I didn't have to stop. I really felt so good and, like, miles 22 to 24, I was, like, pumping up the crowds and, like, putting my arms up, like, I was, like and, they gave it right back, so it was so fun, and I know I've been talking for a minute, but mile 25 was my favorite mile I've ever ran in my life. Like, it was truly magical. Like, your legs are burning, yes, but, like, I was smiling, and I had, like, tears rolling down my face, and I was, like, in disbelief, and then you pass, your Brooks Running Collective members, and that's when I really started crying because they are screaming at the top of their lungs for a member of this team that they're on, and, I've met them both or I've met them all, like, maybe twice in my life in person, and they're just, like, the biggest cheerleaders, and they're screaming for me, and they know it's my first, and, then you see your running club, and then you see your friends, and then, my coach, Neil, he works with, this larger brand called Go Run Stronger, and Gabby Go is the one that founded the program, and she was there because she ran the half, and I round the last corner, and she's standing there yelling, "Go, Leah!" And, like, it's just such a surreal moment, like, I would run that mile as many times as I could because that experience just is, like I don't know, it's just, like, the reason you do it all. So I could not be more grateful for the day that I had and the experience that I had. It was truly remarkable.
It honestly sounds like such a perfect first marathon. You will probably still respect the distance because of that first half, but then
Mhm.
you finish it off in a way where it's not like you're gonna hate the marathon distance going forward, and most likely I'm gonna ask you about that now very soon because we talked for more than an hour already, but it just seems like such a perfect way to start your marathon career, to be honest, and also with such a perfect marathon block.
Yeah. I feel really grateful, and I mean, I'm as shocked that it went as well as it did just because, yes, there's a lot of hard work and training and consistency that goes into it, like, no doubt you reap what you sow, but I also, like, know that there's a there's a lot of luck that goes into the marathon as well, like, you gotta have a good stomach day, like, you can't be, like, feeling off, you can't be sick, like, you gotta have a good weather day, so I, also understand that there's a lot of luck that went into it that also helped me have a good day, and I'm grateful for that, but, yeah, I did also work really hard for this, so I'm really glad that I was able to have a good first marathon experience because 'cause it'll also definitely keep me coming back for years and years, while also knowing that they're not all gonna go this well for sure, which is a little unfortunate, but, um, for my first, I couldn't have asked for anything else.
It seems like a great event. Also, like obviously was watching it from, and I talked to a couple of people who ran it, and it seems like such a nice event, fun event to be a part of.
Yeah. It's great because Indy is flat and you historically get really good weather. If you're competitive, there's enough people to run with at the front. I mean, they're smashing the records every year. Like, I think,
Hmm.
new female record this year or the men's, I think, was smashed by like 2 or 3 minutes, like
Wow.
crazy, 2:12. Like, so it's, and you don't have the crazy logistics of a major. I've never done a major, but I mean, you can stay in a hotel downtown. You're 100 yards from the starting line. Like, they do put on a really, really good race and splat and fast, baby.
Yeah. And then there were, and I feel like we kind of just have to quickly touch on that because there were a couple of very sad things happening too during the marathon, and two people or two runners passed away. Did you see or experience any of it? Was that like close to you? And how was the energy after? Because I feel like it must be a weird thing where people like yourself, you're so happy, like best day of your life, or maybe not the best day of your life, but just a great experience as a runner, and then you get the news or you see that this has happened. Can you just say something about how that was?
Yeah, I think it's very sad and it's very hard to hear. And I mean, we know doing these endurance events, like, it's why they have the medical staff out there. Like, there are unfortunately a lot of, cardiovascular incidents that do happen just because you get a wide range of people, a wide range of fitnesses, um, just differences in, knowledge, honestly, about nutrition and fueling and things like that. So it's hard, and 2 deaths is not common, and I'm glad it's not common, and it shouldn't be, but it's very sad to hear. Um, I didn't see anything while I was running, and, I know a few people that did, and I think that's very hard, and sad that they had to see and experience that and, try to also continue on their race while, um, having to witness that, but at the end, I mean, I didn't know, right, when I finished. I didn't know that that had happened. You see the news after the fact, and you're deeply saddened by it, um, but in the moment, you don't know, and the medical professionals are all out there. They're working so hard. They're, being as proactive as they can. They've got, their systems in place, so you hope that it doesn't happen, but unfortunately, things like that do happen at many of these endurance races, and, I've had a lot of conversations with friends and stuff about thinking, are there ways that this can, not be as common or that, you know, we can help newer runners maybe learn about fueling or hydration, and not that that's everything, right? Sometimes these are underlying conditions and different things like that, or, I think one of the participants was a little bit older, and, um, not saying that any of this should happen, of course, but there are some things out of our control, of course, but, yeah, very unfortunate to hear that after the fact for sure.
Yeah, and it's obviously sad because it's supposed to be that kind of day that you first described for yourself, right? Like a great day, and I also reflected on this after when I read about it because it's heartbreaking, and then you feel for the families. Obviously, they were probably waiting for their friend or family member to come running and cheer them on, kind of like what your friends and family did to you, right? And then you get a very different message, or they don't never get to that point. But then I started, because I immediately started reflecting on this for myself. I think that's kind of normal, that when you are running marathons, you kind of like, oh yeah, these are things that can happen. But
Mm-hmm.
then I also made a reflection, and this is just the way I look at it. I'm not saying that anyone else should look at it that way, but if something like that ever happened to me during a marathon, I would want my family and friends to know that I loved what I was doing, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I was having the best time ever doing it. And in some ways I would be like, at least I was able to do that until the very last moment. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that wouldn't really help my family and friends. It doesn't make anything better or easier. But like you said, it shouldn't happen. But there is always a risk in the things that we're doing.
Uh-huh.
And I would much rather it happen to me during a marathon than like out on, like, if I fell when I was out partying or anything like that, like it would have been so. Uh, these are just my thoughts on it, and I I also feel I'm very happy that you're saying what you're saying about the medical team and the event, because I'm sure it must hurt so much for them, and it's hard. And yeah, just happy to hear that your impression too was that they were there, they tried to do things, and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So I thought that we just needed to touch on that since you did Indy, and just kind of pay our respects to them and their families. But we have to kind of end this episode at a bit of a higher note, and I'm curious about your next races or your ambitions going forward. I know that you and Neil will keep working together, and like, what are your plans?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to, kinda take a week off, and it's not hard. I was, like, ready for it, and you kinda are like, "Man, I gotta sleep in the mornings and not get out and run in the cold." So it was really nice, but, of course, your mind is going a mile a minute, and, I'm pumped about the performance, but I'm more pumped because I feel like I really found, like, my distance, and maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I loved the distance, and I am excited to, like, learn how to, like, tackle it. Um, even like, I know there's just so much room to grow. So, yes. So Neil and I have talked about what we're gonna do going forward, and I just gotta give him, like, a shout out, because for him to do what he does, like, to get me to work hard, to be tougher, like, than I thought I could ever be, and to consistently, like, show up and give, like, real effort. It's special, and it's special when someone sees your potential so clearly that, like, they help you rise to it. Um, and, like, he's taught me, like, results aren't earned, like, you really gotta work for it, but it dreams don't just, like, unfold by accident. Like, you have to have a love for the sport, and you have to have a coach that believes in you. Um, and I just feel so grateful to have, like, him in my corner, because, um, I don't know, I just think he has a natural knack for coaching, and I'm glad he's found that, and he just knows how to get the absolute best out of his athletes, and it's it feels like everything I wanted was available to me. I just had to, like, reach out and get it. Um, so that kind of support changes you. So I just had to shout him out, because I would not have had as successful of a race or a block, or I wouldn't love running as much if it wasn't for, his coaching. So,
That's amazing. Thank you for that, and I'm sure he also will appreciate it. And it's been really cool to see. I've been following, I know both of you, and just to follow that journey on social media, him kind of cheering you on and hyping you up, and you kind of hyping him up. It's been fun to see, and it also proves that like he's a good coach and that really works for you. So, do you have a marathon already kind of planned, or your eyes set on a new race right
Yeah,
now?
so we're gonna work on this is what I love about his coaching as well, is he kinda structures things in, like, 12-week blocks. So you're always fit, you're always training for something, just the stimulus changes. So we did that 12-week marathon block, gonna take a few weeks, ease back into it, and then we're gonna work on some speed. So I'm gonna do some 5Ks in the winter. I have a busy December. I just work in retail, so it's a busy time of year. So just do some smaller stuff, no crazy big workouts. Mileage will be a little lower. Think I'm gonna do a half marathon then in February. So we'll kind of speed block, kind of turn half marathon. We'll probably keep some longer runs in there, of course, to keep the endurance up. See what I can do in that half in February, and then, definitely ready for a spring marathon. It'll be different, training through the winter, and I think spring marathons can be a little tougher,
Oh
or
yeah.
just spring races in general. Like, I remember the half I did last May, you train in the freezing cold, and then you get a slightly humid day, and your body is not used to it, and then it wrecks you, but, um, I'm looking at doing there's a marathon, it's called the Bayshore Marathon. It's in Traverse
Mm-hmm.
City, Michigan.
Yeah.
So, I've heard a
It's
lot
a
of great
fast one.
things. Yeah, that's the goal. But I've heard it's fast. Neil's actually doing it, as well, but that's the one that's kind of in the forefront of my brain. There's one here in Carmel as well. They kinda it's kinda tricky with the weather. That's in April, but yeah, so kinda thinking a late spring-ish marathon, and I think it'll be good to get some of that speed work in there beforehand, so I'm not just, doing marathon block on top of marathon block, but and it's exciting to me, right? Like, okay, you're training for a different distance, you're doing different workouts, like, it keeps things so interesting for me, which is fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to just follow you. I think that this is just the beginning, and yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun, I think, and especially since you had that experience. It could obviously be that the next experience with a marathon will be very different, because that is something that surprised me after my first one. I was so confident. I remember when I think it was the second episode of this podcast, I was talking about this is how the marathon is supposed to feel like. And then I did Boston, and it was just a completely different experience. And obviously Boston is different, but it was just a different experience altogether. And then it kind of felt like it was a different experience also with the one that I did this fall. So I realized that I can't kind of claim or say that this is what it's supposed to feel like. The only thing I can say is that it's usually pretty hard from 20 miles and in. Like
Yeah,
that's where you're gonna suffer, and you can't really train for that.
right.
But Leah, you are now, and this is probably the third or fourth time I'm saying it, you are a marathoner. And last question I have for you, and that is for listeners who are training for their first marathon, preparing for that, and what is your kind of elevator not elevated pitch, but like if you were spending like 2 minutes with them and you were to tell them this is what you have to prepare for and this is the most important thing to remember or know about, what would you say?
Ooh. I would say if you have the goal or the dream of doing a marathon on your heart, but you're maybe worried about it or you're not sure that you could do it, I would say go for it because you have that dream in your head and in your heart for a reason. And I think part of you thinks that it's attainable since it's in your brain. Um, I would say the most important thing, well, I guess I can't say the most important thing, but
Yeah, you can.
there's so many things that are important, but I would say show up every day, do the work, just to the best of your ability. If you're not hitting your paces or, we can get so caught up in the nitty-gritty, but just showing up and getting out there and getting the mileage in, is amazing. I would say practice your fueling. I practice my fueling on every long run. And once again, I only have 1 marathon under my belt. I do not claim to know anything, but my fueling went to plan on race day because I had practiced it for 12 weeks straight. So practice how you're going to perform. Make sure you practice your fueling and try to find joy in the process because you're doing something remarkable. You're doing something that less than 1% of the population is doing. And just be really proud of yourself for pushing yourself to new limits and accomplishing things that are truly remarkable.
That was great. Amazing. And I'm also happy that you said a little bit about the fueling, because I think that is something that people need to know, and we didn't really touch on that. But
Yeah.
Lia, thank you so much. I guess like on this episode, we're going to have a different last name, right, than we had on the first one.
Oh, yeah, we will.
Yeah, wow. So I don't know how we're going to do that so people understand it's the same person, or maybe we'll just let them think that there are two different people we're talking
Yeah,
to
we
here.
can keep I haven't legally changed it yet. I need to get around to that now that I have some
Yeah.
more time on my hands.
We'll use your new one. There are a lot of changes after the last one. You are a marathoner and you're a wife, so it's
Yeah.
big things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming back on, and can't wait to just stay in touch.
Yeah. Thank you, Christian.
That was a long conversation with Lia, but that was a good one, and I am so happy that we were able to have this. We were talking for probably an hour before recording, and we were talking a bit after too. So it's kind of crazy how these friendships just are established through the podcast. And I hope that you as a listener can tell that we've kind of gotten this relationship where it's a friendship. It's not just a podcast host talking to a guest. It's a little bit more than that. And that's something that I appreciate a lot. And honestly, those things mean more than the numbers. So if you really want to make me happy, just send me a message on Instagram. It always makes me smile, always makes my day better. And I appreciate it so much. So I really hope that you guys will continue doing that. And if you haven't done it already and you're like, oh, I should have, please do, because that always just, yeah, makes everything better, makes everything worth it. And it's worth more than any numbers or money that I can make on this podcast. So thank you again so much for listening. I'm very excited about the episodes that are coming out next week. I'm not really sure what order they will come out in, but I can tell you that we are having Jimmy Whelan on in one of the episodes, former professional cyclist, now turned professional runner. And he's got a crazy story. He did a 61:37 half marathon a few weeks or months ago. And that is just the beginning. He's now preparing for his first marathon. And you do not want to miss out on that episode. That was a very, very good one. Thank you again so much for listening to the Marathon Podcast. Really appreciate you being here. Give this podcast a follow, a review if you liked what you heard. And I'll talk to you in the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wall Studio.